Again, everyone, welcome to Tangible Thursdays. I'm glad to have each and every one of you. I'm Lady Jackson. Bishop is not here on tonight. He said he was tired, but we have a topic on tonight that has been dear to my heart all week long, so I'm excited to get started. Hey, Sister Paulette, we're going to be talking about tonight working in the unfamiliar. Watch this. Many of us have been in situations, and even in life now, you love doing what's familiar to you. You'll go to the same grocery stores. You'll drive the same way home. Watch it. You deal with the same people. You don't mind going on the same job. Many of us are in a position where we love the familiar. Those things that are familiar are what we're comfortable with. Those are the things that we like to do, the things that we are comfortable. We can do with our eyes closed. But how many know that what God is doing is working in the unfamiliar? He wants us to be in a posture where we'll move out of what's comfortable in order to obtain what he has for us. We have to work in the unfamiliar, work in those places that we don't know about, work in those places, go to places you haven't been before. Some of the most blessings I have got were when God strategically put me somewhere that I wasn't familiar with. What am I saying to you? In this season, you have to be able to work in the unfamiliar, work with people you don't know, work in places you don't know, work with the ability that you have already within you. Some of us don't believe in ourselves. We don't believe we can make it. Share the video, y'all. We don't believe we can make it. We don't believe we can deserve it. Watch this. Because we're familiar with what we had in our past. Some of us allow the familiarity of people, of our family, of the things we used to do to hinder us from where we're going. I come by on tonight just for a few minutes just to tell you guys, work in the unfamiliar. God can't do anything if you're only able to stay in the position that you're in. If you're only willing to stay, in the position you're in. God is stretching us so that we can work in that unfamiliar place. Hey, Mom Ruby, in the unfamiliar place is where God is trying to get us. Tonight, we're talking about working in the unfamiliar, doing things that are uncomfortable, going places that are uncomfortable, reaching out to people that are uncomfortable. Like, watch this. If you don't like to talk on the phone, God will challenge you. Okay, I need you to go get a job and be on the phone. Why? Because it's something in us that he's trying to breathe out of our uncomfortability. Sometimes we haven't obtained the blessing because we're too comfortable with what we are. We can only see what we are used to. We can only see as far as the people around us. Watch this. The reason why we get around people and family and friends and we're familiar and we seem like we're in the same position is because sometimes they don't challenge you to go any further. When you get around people and you don't, watch this, people you don't know, people you haven't met, when you get in an unfamiliar place, it'll challenge you to breathe what's already in you. It's already there, but God is trying to pull out of us those things that are unfamiliar. Pull out of those things that we don't like to deal with. Pull out of those things out of us what it is that we need in him. And many of us can't allow anything to be pulled out of us if we stay in the same position, if we stay around the same people, if we stay at the same job, if we stay in the same state, if we stay in the same relationship, if we stay around the same friends. Hey, Miss Evans, the more we stay in familiar places, the harder it is for God to breathe out of us what he needs. Many of us are frustrated where we are. I was in prayer today and the Lord said many of them are frustrated. They're frustrated where they are. They're frustrated in our living situation. They're frustrated with the job that they're on. Why? Because it's familiar. And because it's familiar, it's not challenging you anymore. And if it's not challenging you, then guess what? It's not growing you. It's not allowing you to grow. Take this time, share. It's 12 of you on here. It should be more people on tonight. Share the video. But we have to be in a position where we can get out of that familiar place in order for us to grow in what God has for us. In order for us to grow in what we want for ourselves. It wasn't until somebody seen something in me that I realized that I was greater than my mentality. Oh, come on here, somebody. It wasn't until somebody else seen something in me that I realized I was greater than the way I was thinking. That the way I was thinking was too small. That the way I positioned myself. Watch it, because some of us have put ourselves in positions that box us in. We have to get out of, hey, Allison, we have to get out of position and get out of the familiar place. We're talking about working in the unfamiliar. God can only breathe what he has deep down inside of you. He can only develop what's inside of you. He can only pull out inside of you if you're willing to go in unfamiliar places. If you're willing to do the unfamiliar, he's willing to give you what it is that he has. Why? Because the more you're challenged, the more you grow. And see, many of us look at the challenges. We look at the bad things. We look at things we went through. We looked at the trials and testimonies as being places that we don't want to be, instead of realizing that the challenges are what makes us go to the next level. Watch this. Many of you are frustrated right now because you have outgrown the level that you're on now. You're frustrated with people that you've outgrown that level. Their maturity hasn't came up. I was dealing with something the other day and I said, come on here, what is this? Your maturity hasn't came up. You're not developed in the sense that we're not on that level no more. And then many of us, we can't be upset that we cause chaos and be upset that there's a reaction in the familiar place, because sometimes people have grown from a level that you're still on. Don't be upset that you have to detach from people in this next level of life. It doesn't mean that they're not worthy. They just not on the same level. Watch this. When you're in first class and you ride first class, or fly first class, excuse me. When you fly first class, you have more space. You have more leg room. You have more room to do what it is that you need to do. You have more comfortability than in economy. Watch this. You have more comfortability. What am I saying to you? You guys have been too boxed in. You have been held up tight. You have been in the same position where you don't have any room to grow. It's been too long, and it's time for you to get out of that familiar place. Many of us ride economy, we ride coach and things like that because it's cheaper. But will you sacrifice the cheap, watch this, the things that are cheap, the things that are affordable, but what's more comfortable in this season? Some of us have to get there. That no, I don't want to pay that amount anymore. I need to go somewhere else because I need to make new connections. It's not about the money. It's about the connections that are made when you're in an unfamiliar place. Some of you haven't got the money that God promised you. You haven't got the release that God wants you to have. It's because you haven't went to the unfamiliar place. I told a young lady before, she wants, desiring to be with someone and she wants to be found. I said, how can you want a man, a good man, a man that's in church, but you keep going to the club? You're looking for something different in a familiar place. And it's not until we take the time to realize that we're stuck in a place that is familiar that we can realize that God is calling us out if we listen. Many of us, we know God is calling us, but we don't listen long enough to know what he's calling us to. That relationship was on the last level. If it can't go with you, if you can't come up, then you got to go. Some of us have to be like that. I can't cry on this level. I can't be upset on this level. I can't be frustrated on this level. God is constantly moving. He's constantly working. How do you know if you've outgrown what's around you? You've outgrown what's around you when you stop, watch this, when you stop allowing it to get to you. When you know what you know, you don't allow things to get to you anymore. You have to be in a position where you're like, that's beneath me now. I'm not going back to that. If you haven't learned yet, you ain't going to learn. I got to keep moving. I can't be stuck in the same position. I can't be stuck with the same mess. Come on here. Some of us are stuck year in and year out. I know somebody each year, the same season, the same time of year, they go through the same emotional roller coasters, block people, shut people down, and they go through their emotions. And I told them, eventually you got to pull yourself out of there, because eventually you got to realize you got to do more work to get what you want. And many of you have did the same thing year after year. You fasted, you prayed, but you didn't fast with a purpose. You prayed, but you prayed for everything amiss. Come on here, because you were praying out of your flesh. You went to church, but you went to church because my mom told you had to go to church. You didn't go because you wanted a relationship. And then you're trying to figure out why you feel stuck, why you still feel like you can't move, why you feel like things are held up, why you feel like it's not producing. Many of us are not producing because we made promises to God that we never kept. You promised them you would come to service. You promised him you would give your life to him. You promised him you would go back to what you wanted to, what he wanted you to do. You promised him you stop smoking. You promised him you'll stop drinking. You promised him you wouldn't do drugs no more. You promised him you wouldn't lay up with them anymore. You promised him you wouldn't go back to somebody's wife or husband. And then you went back and did the same thing, and you're trying to figure out why you're not blessed, though you're tithing, though you're faithful. Sometimes it's because you went back to the same thing that you already put your mouth on and told God you wouldn't do. I know it's rough, but I know this word is helping somebody. And we have to get out of what's unfamiliar. If the person you're with, if the place you are at, if the relationship you're in, if the business you are in is holding you back from doing what you know God has told you to do, then you got to make up in your mind, am I going to live for people or am I going to live for Christ? I'd rather be validated by God than be talked about by people. I'd rather be validated by God than continue to worry about what people think of me. Especially when you know who you are. You're not going to tell me I'm something that I'm not. Come on here. And we got to get like that when we know it's God. If they tell you you can't come in the store and you know God told you to go, you stand fast and you stand right there until you go in, because that means there's somebody in there that needs to hear the word of the Lord. There's somebody in there that needs to be led up by your light. Sometimes we have to be able to understand that the assignment that's ahead may not be easy. It may be difficult, but it's worth it. And sometimes with it being worth it means you might have to be able to, watch this, readjust where you are now. Readjust the things you are doing. Readjust your schedule. Some of us, we make our schedule for the Monday through Sunday, Sunday through Saturday. We make the schedule and we never included God. Now, you may put your worship on in the car and you may say, I'm going to pray on, I'm going to pray on Tuesday. But how many of us put more attention to our schedule than we do put on God? God should be the first thing you put on your schedule. He should be the first thing you think. Those little things matter in the way that you develop yourself. You can't be strong in Christ if you never invite him in. You can't be strong in Christ if you stay in a familiar place. Come on, we're talking about working in the unfamiliar. God is producing what's new in unfamiliar places. It's not going to come from your friends and family. The business venture, the things that you need ain't going to come. I know I've had businesses, I've had the church, and I have yet to have certain family members and friends actually come yet. And I had to make up in my mind that that didn't matter to me in this season. I had to do what God called me to do, whether they came or not. And that's not shade. That's not being rude. That's not being prideful. That means what God has called me to is bigger than who shows up. If I got on Tangible Thursday and it was just me, I would still have Tangible Thursdays. Why? Because I know this is what God called me to. And many of you have to realize, even though people are not showing up, even though the bank account's not adding up, even though things aren't lining up the way you need to do, if you know God called you to it, remain consistent. Who comes or who goes, you got to remain consistent. Who stays or who flees, you got to remain consistent. Come on here, who has your back or who don't. Whether they sow or don't sow, whether they support or don't support. Remain consistent because you're working in the unfamiliar. If I allow myself to be boxed in by the familiar place, I'd have still been working with the state. I'd have still been having a 9-to-5. Why? Because that's what was familiar for me. And it wasn't bad. The money was good. Things were fine. The benefits was great. But I had to challenge myself to work in an unfamiliar place. And guess what? When I was working in an unfamiliar place, at one point in time, nothing was producing. Hear me. Sometimes the unfamiliar looks as if you're all alone. But as long as you got God, you are never alone. And many of us get turned off and we turn back and we run the other way because we got in a position where we felt like we were by ourselves. As long as you have God on your side, you ain't never by yourself. I know that ain't proper English, but God is good. He know what I mean. We have to be in a position where we know that we have to work in a place that's unfamiliar. I remember, this was years ago, a couple years ago when I was working for the state, he told me to take a different way home. So I went a different way home. I said, okay, turn here. I'll turn here. He said to make a left. I made a left. He told me make a right. I made a right. And I was on his back road. I was like, ain't nothing back here, Jesus. And I'm like, did I hear him clearly? And as I got up a little further, there was a little gas station. Looked like a little, not a gas station, little store, like a convenience store. And I pulled up in the convenience store. And the minute I pulled up in the convenience store, this lady came from behind the building and she needed prayer. Right? So I got out the car and I heard the Lord say she need prayer, but I'm like, Lord, she look like she don't want to be bothered right now. And as I got closer to her, I seen her get teary-eyed. I said, you okay? And me simply asking her, was she okay? She said, nobody asked me if I was okay all day. I've been out here all day. I've been walking the streets all day and nobody has asked me if I'm okay. Thank you for asking me if I'm okay. And I said, well, what do you need? I went in and got her some things, some drinks, some chips and things she needed, the things she wanted. That was, watch this, that lined up with what I believed in. I gave her that stuff and I told her this. I said, I want to pray for you. Can I pray for you? She said, yes. When I got done praying for her, watch this. Somebody pulled up that was related to her that she hadn't seen in years. And they said, well, I'll take you with me. You can go back to my house. And she was able to have somewhere to stay. What am I saying to you? It wasn't the fact that she was, that God, it was me. It was God. She needed somebody to tell her. She needed to be reassured that she was seen. And God is saying, I'm trying to show you that you're seen. I'm trying to show you that you're on the right path. I'm trying to show you that you're in the right vein, but you don't think you are because you're still in a familiar place. You're still in a familiar place. So because you're in a familiar place, that's why you feel alone. That's why you feel unseen. But you got to go into the unfamiliar. Get help from people that don't know you. Sometimes it's the people that don't know you that'll give you the best advice and bless you. Sometimes they see more in you than people you've been around your whole life to have. You hear me? So you have to be in a position that in spite of what it looks like, in spite of what it seems like, I have to work in a place that God has called me to. Whether it seems like it's a drought, whether it feels like it's a desert, whether I feel like I'm out here alone, whether I feel like I'm building by myself, whether I got to cry when I go to bed at night, even if I got a headache when I get up and a headache when I go to sleep. If I know God called me to it, I know that there's a reason why I'm going through this process. Don't be deterred by the process. Hear me, I said it once before. Many of us get so caught up on the end result, we forget that it's the process that matters to God. God is not I'm not worried about giving you the end result. He already gave you the word. It's going to come to pass. It's what you have to learn as you go through that. This is why some of us are challenged not just to go to church on the Facebook. Why? Because you have to get with somebody that's Christ-like. You have to get with iron and sharpen iron. You have to get in a position where you can be in the presence of God. I know people that were in Baltimore now, they're here, and different people that go to the ministry, and they said it's just not the same being online and being in the assembly. Why? Because it's there that you know that God is directly speaking to you. Sometimes it's online and different things where you have these distractions. What am I saying? You got to do what's unfamiliar to you. If it's familiar to you that when you're going through and having a hard time, you run and you close your doors and your windows, you don't talk to nobody, you cut your phone off, you got to do something different. You got to do the unfamiliar. If it's usual to you that when you go through things, you run away from the church, then you got to run to it in this season. And some of you, that's for you. I expect to see you this Sunday because some of you have to run to the presence of God so that he can direct you. The reason why he can't tell you is because you're in a familiar place that you don't hear clearly. Because some of your friends, some of your family, some of your people closest to you, your baby daddy, your baby mom, some of them are in a position where they're taught to hold you back. They don't even realize they're used by the enemy. I was just saying that today. I said some people don't even realize that the enemy is using them. They've been so used to it for so long. It ain't their fault. They don't even realize what they're doing. But in this season, in order to get something new, you got to do something different. You got to submit yourself even when it hurts. You got to submit yourself even when you got to apologize when you ain't the one that's wrong. You got to submit yourself even when people believe in something about you that you know ain't true. You got to submit yourself even when it feels as though you're out there all alone. You got to submit yourself if you feel like don't nobody love you but you. You got to submit yourself if you feel like your kids are going crazy. You got to submit yourself if you feel as though your parents don't understand, your family don't understand. Submit yourself. Because it's in Christ's unfamiliarity that he'll get out those things and he'll develop you to be what somebody else needs. See, sometimes it's not even about us. It's being called to what somebody else is needing in this season. As many people, I've had people that come and they ask me and Bishop and they ask for money and thousands of dollars and all of that. And guess what? It encouraged my faith. Because I said, wow, you think I got that kind of money that I can just give out to you with all my kids? I got a lot of kids. But I'm like, it encouraged my faith. Now, somebody else may think that as an insult, you know, when somebody says that to them, how dare they ask me for that? To me, watch this. It was encouragement because some people see you for where you already are. Some people believe you're already there. And we're not doing bad, but some people think you're way further than what you are, so they can ask you for thousands and thousands of dollars at the drop of a dime, and they think you have it. But watch this. We have to be in a position that we constantly are working, because as you're working, people will see you for what you are. When you want a husband and you want to be found, you should be working. You want a good man, you want somebody that's going to take care of you, let him see you working. I'm helping you, ladies. Come to Single, Saved, and Waiting. I need somebody to put the link in this, get it off my page and put it in the comment section. We talk about all these discussions. It's not just for women. It's for men, women, single, engaged, widows, divorced. Come and have a good time. We talk about these type of things. I'm not going to get into it on tonight, but they should always be working. You should always be working. Even mentally. It says pray without ceasing. How can you be working if you have no direction on what you're working for? We talking about work in the unfamiliar. So sometimes, even when it seems as though things are hard, and many of us are having hard times right now, we're nervous how things are going to turn out. We enter February, and February seems like the rest of January, and January felt like 2021. And many of us are going through where we like, things are difficult. It seems like it's not adding up. I don't have enough money to meet the ends. I don't see where I'm supposed to turn. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know how things are going to happen. And sometimes God is saying, I just want you to submit yourself. I just want you to come to me. I want you to give me a chance, because if you take that step, God will carry you the rest of the way. But you got to take that leap of faith. You got to work in the unfamiliar. And sometimes working in the unfamiliar just means taking a step. Sometimes, thank you so much, Evangelist King. Sometimes working in the unfamiliar means, watch this, you have to go alone. I got in my car today, and after I dropped Imani off to school and things like that, and I had a few things to do. And as I was driving, the Lord was ministering to me. What he said to me was so profound. He says, sometimes what I need from you is opposite of what everybody else is telling you to do. I know what some people are telling you to do seems like it's a good idea. It seems like it's where you should be. It's in the field that you've been in. It's around people. But sometimes you got to get under a place where you can hear God to know that where he's calling you to, sometimes he's pulling on what you have no idea, you have no experience in. I have a young lady on here that goes to the ministry, and I talked to her the other day, and I said, I think you should do like a book club. And she was like, no, lady. And she shared a couple things. She was like, I don't really think I should. You know, I don't really like to do that. And I'm like, no, but sometimes it's in that develops you. I said, and you don't have to do it all the time, but you do it in a sense, watch this, where you're working in the unfamiliar. She didn't even understand. This was just a couple days ago. And God gave me this on Sunday, working in the unfamiliar. But because of that, it will develop in her the thing that gives her the confidence, so that when it's time for her to come forward and time for her to be in the front and it's time for us to call on her, she'll be ready, because she was able to deal with the people in a certain setting. And if you can deal with them on a one-on-one setting, you can deal with them when you're up in the pulpit. If you can deal with them in the pulpit, you can deal with them one-on-one. But God is saying, I got to pull at you where it's unfamiliar. I got to tug at you where you got to get out of that, so you can only trust me. See, he's only pulling you in an unfamiliar place so you can totally trust him. That's good. He's only doing it because he wants you to totally be able to trust him. Lean on me to get this done. Lean on me to give you the steps to make it happen. Lean on me to give you the guidance on where you need to be. Lean on me. It was when I went through the roughest things a few years back, years and years back. I went through the roughest time of my life, and the Lord told me, don't tell nobody. That was the hardest thing for me, but guess what? It developed in me the relationship that I have with the Lord now. That's why when I know I'm not wrong, I can stand on I'm not wrong, because I know what God has said to me. I know what it feels like to be loved in the midst of feeling like nobody around you even sees you. I don't tell y'all anything that I haven't worked through myself. Hear me. And sometimes we have to deal with the unfamiliar in order to get what God has for us. You got to lean on him totally. We talking about tonight working in the unfamiliar. I'm almost done. Working in the unfamiliar so that he can develop what's in you, what you need to be. Sometimes it can't come around people that you always come around, that you always know. Sometimes the hardest time is for you to be in ministry in places where people know all your business and know everything about you. Why? It's because sometimes they always have a prejudgment of a word or a prophecy or different things that is saying, coming forth to you based on what they know instead of based on what the Lord is saying. Sometimes you got to get into that unfamiliar place. I remember another time when I was in Middletown and I had to bless this young lady. I didn't know. When I reached in my bag and the Lord said, give her everything that you touch, I didn't know what I was blessing her for. I actually made sure it wasn't the enemy. Is this the devil? The Lord said, give her everything. I gave her everything. And it was all bundled up. And when she went back in, she counted it. I checked my food and came back out crying. And it was the remainder of her rent. It was the remainder of what she needed. But guess what? I was in an unfamiliar territory. I was in an unfamiliar situation. It's times where the Lord directed me, literally directed me to a store. Directed me to a store to go in, and it was simply because a young little boy had lost his mom, and to him and his grandmama, I was trying to figure out why they was following me around the store. He said I look like his mother, and I hugged him and I held the little boy. He might have been 5 or 6, and he just cried, but it was what he needed, because the grandmother said he was having a hard time, but it was because I went to that unfamiliar place. It may mean that you got to take a different route. It may mean that you got to waste more time. It's never wait. First of all, let me take that back. It's never wasted time if you're doing something for Christ. It may mean that you have to spend more time. But if you know that God is telling you to do something, do it. Because you never know what impact you will have on somebody. I remember when I first started working for the state and we went through a training. And then I'm getting ready to close. I got a couple more things and I'm closing. And the gentleman told me, he said, you'll be the pebble in the water that'll make a change. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you ever drop a pebble in the water and it's a ripple effect? He said, you'll be the ripple effect everywhere you go. And that stuck with me. Why did that stick with me? Because what God is calling us to is be the pebble in the water around us. Yours may be a pond. Somebody else's may be an ocean. Somebody else may be a lake. Somebody else may be have a little teeny bit of water. It might have just rained in one spot. But be the pebble. Be the difference. I said this earlier. Be the leader. Be the example. How you going to tell your people not to quit and every time you turn around you quitting? How you going to tell somebody to keep on pressing through and you don't press through? How can you tell somebody in the midst of having an attitude, in the midst of doing this and that you got to stand firm and stay in the front? Come on here, stay face forward and have the face to do what God has to do if you don't do that. We have to be in a position that when we're in an unfamiliar place, we know that it's God and we can lean solely on God so that God can only get the glory. God will give you the wisdom to minister to somebody in a situation you've never been through and you know that it's only Him. Work in the unfamiliar. I challenge you on this week for the next 7 days. Do something unfamiliar. Go an unfamiliar way home. Make a stop that you normally don't make. Go to a little boutique that you normally don't go to so that you realize how God can move in such a way from your obedience, just from Tangible Thursdays. Come on, it's been times that I went to places in an unfamiliar place and they literally gave me money. Oh my goodness, you have such a pretty smile. Can I give you something that blessed me with something? It's not about the material things. It's about the obedience. And you never know in the unfamiliar place when you'll entertain an angel, when you'll entertain something or someone that needs to be affected. Watch this. Affected by the God in you. Infected by the God in you. You ever see somebody irate and upset and certain people come around and they calm right down? Sometimes you got to be that to people you don't even know. Sometimes you got to be that so that you know that there's power within you. It'll remind you who you are in yourself. I challenge you for the next 7 days. Do something unfamiliar. Work in the unfamiliar. Continue to be blessed. Me and Bishop will be back on next Thursday. Y'all have to get him. He said he was tired. We'll be back on next Thursday. Don't forget your homework. If you have not registered for the Single Saved and Waiting, please go and register. Even if you're a couple, if you're not married, you are able to come to the Single Saved. Matter of fact, if you are married, you can come to the Single Saved and Waiting. Many people that are married come not because they're there to spectate. Sometimes they come and they give great advice so that you're prepared for what God has for you. Register for the Single Saved and Waiting. The link is above. If you would like to sow, it's not mandatory. The Cash App is $Tyshee Jackson. Not an obligation, but I am blessed each and every one of you that do decide to sow, not just now, but even during the week. Again, meet us at Eden. Thank you, Evangelist King. You are the best. I love you so much. You're awesome and amazing. Y'all, I love Evangelist King. If y'all are available this Sunday, we have Prophet Terrell Turner preaching our 11 a.m. service. Meet us there. Be there in the place. I know it's going to be a move of God. Some of you who God is challenging you, when I said that you need to be in service and you need to come to church, don't let anything stop you from this Thursday to Sunday from getting you to the house of the Lord. Make it to Eden, 50 West Commerce Street, Smyrna, Delaware. Make it to the house of the Lord. There is a word for you. If it's pulling at you, that means God is trying to get your attention. Don't be distracted, because when God is trying to get your attention, the enemy will send a distraction. Don't be distracted by Sunday morning if you ain't got nothing to wear. Come as you are. Come on here. Don't worry about that. We're not a church that worries about all that. We just want you to get what God has for you. So again, register for Single Saved and Waiting. Meet us on Sunday morning at Eden International, 50 West Commerce Street. And remember, whatever you need, God has it tangible. The Cash App is in the bottom of the section. For those who somebody just inboxed and asked, it's at the bottom of the section. Again, I love each and every one of you. Work in the unfamiliar. Your homework, next 7 days, do something different. Don't go the same way home. Talk to somebody different. Matter of fact, some of you need to, I just heard this, some of you need to pick up the phone and call old friends that you haven't talked to in a while and let them know that you're thinking of them. Thank you, Evangelist. Let them know that you're thinking of them. You never know what they're going through. Sometimes we disconnect from people. We stop talking to people and we think that they're acting funny. You never know what somebody's going through. Pick up the phone and call somebody that you haven't called in a long time and just say, I love you. I'm just checking on you. If they're in the area, say, I just wanted to invite you to go to church, even if Eden's not your church. So I just want to invite you to go to Eden with me this Sunday. Do something unfamiliar. Do something different and watch how God blesses you. I love each and every one of you. Don't forget, whatever you need is tangible within inside of you. I love you guys. We'll see you, Bishop and I see you next Thursday for Tangible Thursday, 9 p.m. Put your notifications, follow me, put your notifications on. If you would like to make an appointment, the website is up too. I love each and every one of you. Remember to do your homework. Work in the unfamiliar.